Hey, Tasha, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Sharon. How are you?
Man, it is a fantastic day today.
Today is a good day.
Today is a good day. Today we have found out that after a long, arduous voting scenario
And 4 years.
and 4 years, we now have a new president, President Joe Biden of Delaware, President-elect Joe Biden of Delaware.
Yes, and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. Congratulations.
Historic, super excited. Let's just talk about the week for a minute, right? Like you and I both voted early. You and I talk every day. And this week, I personally have really just not watched that much news in the past 4 years. But this week I had to go into a bubble, as many of our friends did.
Yeah.
So it was nice to come out of the bubble today.
Yeah. And breathe, right? We talked about the battle not being over, but at least we can be like, whew, let's take a breath.
Yeah. So what was very helpful for me this week was we had a girlfriend's Kiki, and that's just our girls getting on Zoom, just some amazing women, and we were just incredibly supportive and caring and nurturing, and all the way away from anything political, because we needed it for ourselves, our mental health, quite frankly.
For sure. Kept me up past my bedtime, but it was worth it. We celebrated one of the ladies in our group. It was her birthday, and so we were able to celebrate her. And so it was very fulfilling, right? Yeah. We were talking about this earlier. Like, I didn't realize how much of that, inpouring and outpouring of love that had been missed, right? Typically, like, we'll see each other at events and that sort of thing. But because we've been on lockdown for however many months. We've just been missing each other. So
yes,
let's tell the people who we are. We just started talking.
Oh yeah, we just got into it. Yeah, I am Sharon,
and I'm Tasha. I live in Maryland,
and I live in North Carolina, and we are the accountability queens. There's always a delay there. I don't know why, but anyway, Tasha and I have been accountability partners for about 9 years now. And we have helped each other reach such incredible goals, and we show others how to find their ideal accountability partner, as Tasha is my ideal accountability partner. And
my ideal partner is
we really are. and we help other people find their ideal partner and have a successful accountability relationship. We've been able to achieve so much because we've had each other to lean on and guide and direct and keep calm and stay focused. So, definitely always check us out. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. We're here. We want to get to know you. Tonight's topic, though.
Yeah. Let me just make sure I give a shout out to the people that are joining us. If you're with us on the Accountability Queens page, please say hello in the comments. I'm watching the comments.
Yes.
And if you have questions tonight, which I really hope this is going to be an engaging conversation, I'm super excited. Drop it in the comments. Keith is with us this evening as always, and Gail, two strong supporters with us typically every week. So glad to have you all.
Glad to have, and that was me trying to get live, and it's All right, so tonight we are talking about, so what just happened?
Yeah.
Because it's been like, I couldn't handle it. I had to just tap out and say, come get me in a couple days. But tonight we have attorney Walter Adams. Let's just talk about how we know Walter.
Ooh.
How about you give your story about how, or what you remember, or what strikes you about Walter?
I know Walter as the person that has brought joy and a smile like I've never seen before to one of my girlfriend's faces, right?
That's absolutely true.
I've known Nicole for quite a while, and I remember hearing about this guy that she knew from her past, right?
Yeah.
They sort of drifted apart, and how they got back together was nothing but God, and that he was just amazing. I mean, she just lights up.
Girl, she ain't stopped beaming in the last 5-6 years. She's been beaming the entire time.
Instant love for this guy just because of who he is to her and who he's been in her life. And so and he fits, right?
Yeah, he fits the family.
He fits the family, right?
He definitely fits. I one of my moments about Walter is we were all going to an Urban League meeting and my car got towed. For some reason, we were at the Urban League 4 meeting. I don't know what meeting it was, but my car got towed.
Oh.
And I had to go find it. And Walter was like, "Well, listen, I'll take you over," and had to pay the city of Baltimore a grip to get in my car. And I said, well, and I think that's the night I said to him, I said, "Well, Walter, are you excited about getting married?" And he said, I'm not really pressed about the wedding. I'm excited to be her husband."
Oh,
yeah, that's what he said. And that's, of course, why we all love Walter. But in addition to that, Walter is an attorney. He is the assistant attorney general for the District of Columbia. He is a graduate of Morehouse and George Washington Law. So he has been active. He was a poll watcher in Pennsylvania, no less,
in one of the swing counties.
In the swing county, because as you see the results, it is by a narrow sliver, and I mean like decimals, that Joe Biden won. So let's bring Walter in to the studio. Hi, Walter.
Good evening, ladies. How are you?
Good.
Oh, so happy to have you.
I'm happy to be here.
All right, Walter, let's just get into it. You were a poll observer in Bethlehem, right?
Yes, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
In Bethlehem, now you live in Washington, D.C. You're an AG, assistant AG in Washington, D.C. How did you end up in Bethlehem, and what was that experience like? What did you see? Like, what was your feeling, and what happened there?
Well, I got to tell you, the first thing this summer, I had decided that I could not sit at home during this election, that I had to be involved in one form or the other. So what happened is that, the Democrats did a very good job of using the electronic medium to recruit people. And I got, eventually I got a message from from DNC about whether or not I'd be interested in volunteering live on election day. And the state that picked us up, I guess the one that's closest to us that was a swing state, was Pennsylvania. So essentially, I went through training, and a week prior to the event, I was picked up for Northampton County, Pennsylvania, which is where Allentown, Pennsylvania, and Bethlehem lies. So actually, it was a really good experience. I mean, I went there with the idea with like a guide of Pennsylvania laws and what are the rules for who's supposed to be able to vote and what to do if someone's denied the opportunity to vote. But what actually occurred is that Nicole and I, we bought a bunch of snacks, and it turns out that our polling place was next door to Lehigh University. So what happened is that for essentially first part of the day, we fed the voters. We asked them if they had any questions, and then after about 2:00, there was a trickle of voters afterwards because of the immense efforts for early voting. So my job was pretty much done early on in the day. So we had a good time. We had a good time there, and we spoke with the those who support the Republican candidates, and And actually, it was fine. Everyone was nice. We had actually a really wonderful day up there, and it's really was gratifying to see to see young people involved, and also to see that our county, the county that I was assigned, flipped from Bush to, I mean, it's not from Bush. Am I kidding? Flipped from Trump to Biden.
Yeah,
but by very narrow numbers, right?
Exactly. I think as of right now, Northampton County is like about 1,200 votes, and but that polling location had, I think, was about 70% Biden.
Okay.
so I know one of the cases that, or one of the issues that the GOP is having is about poll observers not being able to actually do their job, right? So did you experience that at all? And then one of the other questions from the audience is, were you involved in the one court case that Trump has about having voters move 4 feet closer, right? So did you have any experience with that?
I had no experience of being in any of the litigation. Really, our job was to assist people, also be fact collectors. Like, in case something did occur, if we noticed something was awry, that would be something that would require court action to essentially be there and to collect those facts and do it in live time. So I was not involved. In terms of this whole thing about the poll observers, that's a bit of a misnomer. What occurs is that to be an inside poll observer, whether it's in Pennsylvania and probably in most states, if you're going to be inside of a polling location, you actually have to be a resident of that locality, and I guess in the case of Pennsylvania, or at least to be able to vote within that state. So if you have people from other locations coming in, no, they cannot be on the inside watching polls, and that's not really anything that's controversial. That's pretty standard. So for where I was outside the whole time in the cold because I live in the District of Columbia, and there's no reason for being there. But in some ways, I was actually grateful because I didn't have to stick around for the final tally. After 16 hours, I was gone. I was like, okay, fine, I'm out. So, but yes, it's not really controversial, but some people try and make controversies where none exist.
Yeah. So, Walter, what is the simplest? I mean, we're just going to start with some basics here, right? What's the simplest definition of the Electoral College?
Very simply, the Electoral College is a group of electors that are selected by each of the 50 states. And their whole role, their complete role and only role is to come to Washington every 4 years to make the official vote for the President of the United States. So in this case, right now, the number of electors is 538 electors. So when you see this on the broadcast where they say 270, essentially what they want to do, or what they're saying, is that at least 270 of the electors must vote in favor of whomever the president will be. As long as there's 270 votes are there, then that creates through the Constitution the selection for who the next president for the next congressional term will be. So essentially, the states have their different mechanisms for selecting the electors, and most states require the electors to actually vote the will of the people within that state. And so that's what we expect in this case. The only two exceptions are Nebraska and Maine, which will have some splits in terms of the electors. And we expect them to meet here in December and cast their votes accordingly, if all goes normally.
So, wait a minute. Are you saying that there's a chance? I mean, because I just watched, right? And so at least my most recent count that Biden had 290 of the electorates.
Yes, they have.
So are you saying that there's a chance that someone could vote differently? Did I misunderstand?
There is a chance, and that is rare. If you may remember back in 2016 when when Trump was elected, and Democrats had a problem with Trump being elected. And also back in 2000, during the Bush-Gore election, there's some issues about, well, will people vote that way? Now, again, certain states has it required that you must vote along the lines of the majority vote for the state. However, some states have what they call faithless electors, and those faithless electors could make their own decision at that time. However, there's some even if there's not legal consequences, there's some real consequences for doing that. What I've heard is some people are worried about states like in Pennsylvania, which has a majority Republican state legislature, whether or not legislatures would try to amend their rules in order to have to give the electors their own free mind in terms of voting. Again, that's never happened, and I don't necessarily anticipate it happening here. But in terms of the question being, could it happen? Sure, things could happen. And unfortunately, since 2016, we become used to the idea of
anything can happen.
New things occurring.
Right. And so that's why we would see a difference between, the popular vote and who wins according to the Electoral College. Exactly.
But what I think that's important here is that back in 2000, the issue was whether one state, where there was a controversy in one state, in Florida. However, at this point, we're looking at close elections in several states. You're talking about Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Wisconsin, and Michigan. So at a certain point, there becomes too many states for one party to be able to change the rules. And so the more states that Vice President or now President-elect Biden is able to collect and to his favor, then less of a chance that someone could conspire to really affect the overall outcome of the election.
Yeah. Do you think we'll get away from the Electoral College at all?
Well, that's a very good question, and I think I would like to say yes, but the fact of the matter is I don't really think that that's going to happen within the short term. The Electoral College is part of, it's in Article it's in Article 2 of the Constitution. And so that would require an amendment. So we already are talking about a situation. So essentially, in order for that to happen, both parties would have to agree to that the Electoral College would no longer serve its purpose. At this point, what the Electoral College allows people to do, it allows a much smaller segment of the population to have inordinate power. Simply stated, someone who lives in Wyoming, their vote is more powerful than someone who lives in the state of New York. And I don't see in the divided partisan country, I simply don't see 2/3 of the senators coming in, or even through a referendum through the states. I don't see that happening where 2/3 of the states would vote to change something within the Constitution.
Yeah. Okay.
That's good. So, pardon me, had some technical difficulties, but I know my partner kept going. So, and I hope Tasha didn't already ask this question, but what if Trump doesn't concede?
She did not ask that question.
Okay, good. Way to go, partner.
Well, Trump doesn't. There's nothing in the law. There's nothing that actually requires anyone to concede anything ever. It's just that it's been a tradition that has occurred. This tradition first started back in 1896 when William Jennings Bryan sent a telegram to the eventual president, William McKinney, to concede that election. He did it by telegram. And it became a tradition that presidential candidates have followed faithfully since that time. So the fact of the matter is that nothing legally requires President Trump to concede. Really, the issue is he can sit there all he wants. When the Electoral College votes, that will be the constitutional process to determine who's going to be the president for the next congressional term. And if it's not in his direction, it's going to be very difficult for him to really kind of to stay there at that point. I would imagine that there's people within the Republican Party who, for their own reasons, especially considering that there's still 2 senatorial seats still on the line, that the fact that if President Trump were to do too much in one direction or the other, that there could be consequences from that. And with those two seats still being outstanding, that they may want to make sure that the Republican Party doesn't seem too unreasonable by the time of the election.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have some questions from our audience. You just mentioned the race in Georgia. Can you explain the importance of that Senate runoff race that's happening in January in Georgia?
Sure. The importance of that race right now, according to projections, both parties have 48 senators. And in the case of the Democrats actually have 49, because we forget that, that's 48 with the 2 independents. That's Bernie Sanders and Angus King from Maine, who are the independents who vote on our side. So essentially, this is for control of the Senate. And if you have control of the Senate, that is control of essentially everything. So right now, there's a Democratic House of Representatives. The next Congress will be, in terms of House of Representatives, will have majority of Democratic Party. So right now there will be a split government because the Senate is currently run by the Republicans, and as a result, all the committees are the majority person is the Republicans run those committees. They set the agenda. They determine who votes in those committees. So in a situation of Supreme Court nominee or any judicial nominee, if you have the Republicans in control, they will determine whether or not it comes to vote. And as we saw a few years ago with Merrick Garland, if Mitch McConnell doesn't want to allow that person to have a vote, he doesn't have to have that happen. So if those 2 seats were to turn Democratic, and we have Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff there, if we become Democratic, you'll have a tie, and that tie will be broken by Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. So once she would become the vice president, then that would essentially be the 51st vote, and then the Democrats would control the Senate.
I mean, so this is one of those situations, we talked about when we first started that, we can sort of take a breath right now, but the fight's not over, right? I think, we have to continue to stress the importance of that race that's happening in January, right? And people getting out to vote for that runoff.
It is. And this is really one of the unique things. For me, living in Georgia, Georgia is one of the few states that has this rule that requires a full-on runoff if someone doesn't capture 50% of the vote. In the past, that has skewed towards the Republican Party because for whatever reason, you're inherently going to have less of a turnout. But normally that turnout because there's a lesser turnout, that turnout tends to skew Republican. And even more so in this case, the runoff is going to be on January 5th. So that's 5 days after New Year's and 10 days, or I guess really 11 days after Christmas. So trying to keep people focused on politics during a holiday season is going to be difficult.
Yeah.
But I believe they can do it.
I believe so too. And I just realized that I'm embarrassed to admit this. I just realized that I went to school with Raphael Warnock. So I'm like if we were there, we crossed paths while we were at Morehouse College. So I gotta go down and support the brother.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was in Baltimore for a little while too.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Yeah. He was a preacher in Baltimore for a few minutes, just for a few.
Okay, that sounds interesting.
I mean, it's just for a view.
It is a review.
So, one of the other things, we talked about court cases and that sort of thing going on, and the Republican Party has said that they're going to file legal actions on Monday. Give us your take on, what could happen with that, and will any of these, complaints make it to the Supreme Court?
Well, I'm sure maybe one or two will make it to the Supreme Court at some point through the appellate process. But the question really would be on what issue, and that's what's unclear. And more importantly, on what and where will they be filing these actions? Mm-hmm. The thing that's been confusing is that in Pennsylvania, this party the Republican Party took efforts to ensure that votes that didn't arrive by a certain time were not counted, that they took actions to make, or through the administration, through frankly our own taxpayer paid government, filed actions regarding the USPS and the uncollected ballots to make sure that those ballots weren't actually counted. So the position for GOP up to this point has been to restrict what is counted. So now they're going to have to turn on a pen and say that they want more votes counted one way or the other. Yeah. One of the things that we're looking at is whether in situations where they want to invalidate certain votes. But again, what basis are they going to make those arguments on? The mail-in system has been accepted because if they were to get rid of certain mail-in votes that were disfavorable to them, then they also risk the idea of losing votes that were also favorable to them. So there's again it's a very weird balance that they have to strike. But then again, what state are they going to do it? Because if they can try for Pennsylvania, but if Arizona holds and if Nevada holds, then the 270 threshold has still been passed. Right. So it doesn't really matter. At this point, they'll only be essentially affecting the very phrase or the periphery of the election. And again, since they already had a case in Pennsylvania to restrict vote counts, it'll be strange for them to go back to those same courts to open up for more counting.
Yeah. I think people, were concerned because he's, loaded the Supreme Court that he could just automatically take his case to the Supreme Court, right?
He cannot do that. So I apologize.
Yeah, he can't do that.
He can't do it.
There's a process. I mean, First of all, he has to go through the district court, then through the circuit court of appeals. And at that point, you're looking for, if depending on what their votes are or those decisions, even the Supreme Court would have to have some form of basis to overturn a decision. As much as the president wants to think that, that the Supreme Court is some form of a spoil system whereas people who are appointed by a particular party will vote a certain way, it's not necessarily the case. And so, I mean, clearly there's been justices and frankly on this current court who have been very partisan, such as Thomas and Alito, and he's counting on them to be equally as partisan, but they would still have to articulate some form of legal standard to go in his favor. And again, he can't collect all the states all up at one time and take it to the Supreme Court. So it's a matter of, okay, maybe he gets a win in Pennsylvania, but if Arizona, Nevada, and the other states hold firm, then he has nothing.
Right. One of the other questions from our audience, speaking of the Supreme Court, do you think the Supreme Court will or can be expanded under Biden?
Can it be expanded? Sure, it can be expanded. It can absolutely be expanded. However, the only way it can be expanded is through a congressional vote. So that's where you start talking about the practical nature of this. The last time the Supreme Court was expanded was back in 1937 under Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and that was before we had term limits for president. And he almost through that basis, was able to create resistance within the Republican Party, which led to there being a very tight election for President Truman after Roosevelt's death. And I think that's risky. And although Vice President-elect Biden has succeeded here, a lot of his votes depend upon independents and have, in some cases, depended upon Republicans themselves. So the risk that you have here is that, yeah, you can expand the court and try to pack it in, which would have some impact, but would it be worth losing the House of Representatives and the rest of Congress by doing so? Mm-hmm. And that's the balance that has to be made.
Yeah. The audience also asks, so how much power does Trump have from now until January 20th?
Oh boy. He has all the powers that he currently has. He does not have a diminution in his powers. So this is the scary part, ladies and gentlemen. We don't know what he could do between the present date and January 20th. He can make executive orders. He can try to insulate himself. He can do those sort of things. Again, the risk for him would be, or at least because I wouldn't say for him, because I don't really consider him a traditional politician. The risk for the GOP is whether or not they would stand behind him for those actions. Mm-hmm. The most obvious thing that we know is that has been predicted will happen is that he's going to make a lot of pardons. He's going to try to pardon a lot of people who've been convicted at this point. Now, the risk of that is that some people want pardons because you've already been convicted. You're already in jail. You're in a situation like that. The one thing that's interesting is that if you get pardoned, that's essentially an admission of guilt, that you should have been convicted of whatever crime you did commit. Now, for people who live in the upper echelons of American society, it may not matter. Even though people know that person's a felon, they may not care.
Right.
But for the average Joe, it may not be such a good deal. But yeah, there will be pardons.
Mm.
So what do you think, all right, so we know anything is likely. He can do he still has that full level of power. How likely is the Congress to get behind him to support these actions? I mean, what's the ramifications for Republicans to support some of these actions, and he's on his way out, if any?
Well, the scary thing here is that, what showed up in the 2016 election. Biden's lead is only I shouldn't say only 4 million votes, but essentially only 1 million votes more than what Hillary Clinton's popular vote count was. And you also have a situation where, of course, Democratic votes went up, but Republican votes also went up as well. Although it's tough for me to rationalize why that occurred or what specific initiative that Trump supported is what is driving that. You have a situation where the Republican parties have always been more, in my opinion, more bold about their strategies. Yeah. And would these GOP senators, looking at the turnout and looking at the closeness of the election, still want to be still want to be associated with that? Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
So sorry. And so we're essentially where you are is that you have, unless you're in Texas or one of those states where there was some concern of your state flipping, you may see a lot of support for Trump for some of his actions, unless, again, this is in our pre-conversation. This is a person who survived an impeachment. And since he survived that impeachment, has only become more emboldened.
Yeah. Our audience asks, can he step down and turn it over to Pence and allow Pence to pardon him from future charges? Doesn't he wish?
No, actually, that's a very good question. I don't believe that the pardon powers are actually are prospective. They're only retrospective. So you cannot be pardoned in advance. The only thing that could happen is that Pence would make it so that DOJ would not charge him in that time. So sure, he can step down, but he cannot be pardoned indefinitely. The question that really comes up is whether a Biden administration would pursue federal charges against Trump and Trump's officials for any of the crimes that may have been committed during this administration. Some precedent says that it normally doesn't happen because of essentially because of our nature and the divine nature of the country, that concerned about whether or not it would rile one side of the country versus the other side of the country. However, this may be a time for a Biden administration to at least state the principle of the rule of law. I'm originally from Chicago. In Illinois, we've had four or five governors who've gone to jail. So it's not unprecedented for elected officials to be convicted and go to jail. It's just a matter of whether or not, with a president who is popular for 74 or 70 million some odd voters, whether or not it'll be worth it.
Yeah.
He will not be immune from any state charges, obviously.
Yeah. Ooh.
All right. So first of all, Walter, we have absolutely enjoyed talking to you. I mean, we could probably go on for hours.
Of course. I would love talking to you for hours, Sharon.
But we have come to the lightning round where Tasha asks 11 questions, kind of like inside the actor's studio. So I will ask my partner to take it away.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Walter. Yeah, it has been a lot of fun. Very informative, right? I think our audience enjoyed it as well.
Yeah.
All right. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. What's your favorite word?
Today, that word is, I have many words, but I would say love and victory are my favorite words.
All right. And what's your least favorite word?
Okay, I have to say that the cliched word is moist, but it's not a good word. That's cliche, but worm. I do not like worm. Worms are weird. I hate invertebrates. It's a long story.
Okay.
All right. What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
One of my side hustles, or not really side hustles, one of my creative outlets is acting. I've done a couple acting classes, and so it's fun.
And plays.
Yes.
Yeah, I did a couple plays. Yeah, I have.
Right? You were at the arena stage.
I was on stage a couple years ago, so I'm going to take a few more courses before I do another endeavor.
All right. And what turns you off?
Certain forms of intractable conflict that when people don't listen to each other and in a conflicting way, that's not a great thing.
Mm-hmm. What's your favorite curse word?
Okay. My friend.
My friend? Is your favorite curse word?
You not literally my friend. You take the M and the F.
Oh, MF. It's like double hockey stick. Sure.
Exactly. Exactly. My friend is
my friend. I love it.
Exactly.
I so went over
way over my head.
My friend. Yeah.
What noise do you love?
An infant's giggle. I love an infant's giggle. All
right. What sound or noise do you hate?
Okay. Open mouth chewing. I hate that.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Policy. I would love to have a role either being a policy director of an organization, or being involved in some way in science policy, whether it be in the community or even with an industrial or company or corporate group.
Okay. And what profession would you not like to do?
A corrections officer.
Because
that just sucks.
Who or what holds you accountable?
Nicole Adams.
Good answer.
Easy.
All right. If you believe in heaven, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
That you were good to others and made your parents proud.
Oh, very nice. One last comment. Someone says this was the best guest. Can you get to that?
That person had a bias. That person's biased.
She definitely has a bias.
There's a bias.
Well, listen, it looks like Sharon is still having some technical difficulties, but it has been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, there she is.
So much for
I don't know what's going on.
agreeing to sit down with us tonight.
Yes.
Because I know that Saturday night is date night.
Yes.
And so this was, definitely extra special for us tonight. And so we definitely appreciate you taking the time.
For you, the ladies of Accountability Queens, I would, my time is your time. Anytime you need me, I'm always there.
All right.
Listen, we want to thank you. Thank your wife, AKA your press agent, for allowing this to happen tonight. And if anyone wants to follow us, please continue to follow us on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. Join us next week. We'll have a great topic. And have a good night, everyone. Be safe.
All right, take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.